All right, so we are going to get started with tonight's industry interview. The industry interview program of Kids Comics Unite is something that has ebbed and flowed a little bit. We did a lot of industry interviews in 2020 and 2021. And then the first half of this year, I feel like we didn't do quite as many, but we're hoping to get back into it and do it more frequently. We talked to Raymena Yee last month, which was super awesome. And today we have Shannon Watters, which is such a big deal. So yay, please. You can, nobody can hear you, but we'll all clap for Shannon. So Shannon Watters is the co-creator and co-writer of Lumberjanes, which is one of the most groundbreaking and influential kids all ages graphic novel series out there today. And she was an editor at Boom Studios, and I think she's still an editor, although I will hear more about that.
I am still an editor, but not. I'm a layabout now. I'm a freelance.
Well, we'll find out more about
how, now.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about that. And she has a new book that just came out, and it is so perfect for the season. It's called Hollow. It's very Halloween-y, and you know, Halloween is coming right up. So maybe, Shannon, you could start off by kind of telling us a little bit about yourself, go a little bit more in depth beyond just the highlights that I have given, and then we can roll into talking about the new book.
Yeah, totally. So hi, everybody. I'm Shannon. I was, as explained, an editor at Boom Studios for about 12 years. And I started there as an assistant editor in very early 2010, and worked on a number of things while I was there. I was head of the Kaboom imprint for a number of years, and spearheaded all of our Cartoon Network books, the Adventure Time books that Ryan North worked on, and then I also, after I did that for a few years, I founded and ran the Boombox imprint, which is a YA and teen-focused imprint for marginalized creators and like marginalized characters. Had a lot of fun doing both of those things. And then while I was there, I was the co-creator and co-writer of the series Lumberjanes, and did that for a very long time. And I left Boom in late 2021 because I just wanted to do other things. You know, I wanted to tell more stories. I wanted to do more writing. And Hollow is coming. It just came out 2 weeks ago. I've gotten so used to saying that it's coming out that I nearly said it again. But it came out on October 4th, and it's been great. So
maybe you could tell us a little bit about the story of Hollow, and then after you've told us the story, we can go into a little bit about how the whole thing came about.
Yeah, totally. So Hollow is a contemporary YA take on the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And I will spoil it slightly since this is an industry event. We basically have a contemporary teenager who moves to the town of Sleepy Hollow, New York. And there is kind of a team up with the Headless Horseman that occurs to solve a supernatural mystery. And there's queer romance, and it's very funny and very beautiful, much more spooky than scary. And it takes place during the Halloween season in the town of Sleepy Hollow, New York, which, if none of you have been to Sleepy Hollow, is a real town that takes their history and their legacy as a place that has spooky history very, very seriously. The Headless Horseman is on the side of the ambulance. The Headless Horseman is on the fire trucks. He's on the street signs. The mascot for the high school is the Horseman. They take it very, very seriously there. And our kind of heroine who moves to Sleepy Hollow, she is obviously kind of a skeptic and has to both grapple with the fact that ghosts are real and that she's moving to this town that its entire identity is focused around a ghost story, basically. And it's a lot of fun.
So tell us the backstory of it. So how did the idea come about?
So my partner and I went to Sleepy Hollow. My partner Brandon, who is also Brandon Boyer White, who is also my co-writer on Hollow. She's a fiction writer, and we went to Sleepy Hollow, New York, in Halloween season in October of 2019, and really did it up, had a ball, and we're totally taken aback by this community and their kind of like their devotion to this, this, and their affection, specifically their like deep affection for the Headless Horseman. And it's very clear that he is a friend to them, like this ghost is their pal, as a community and as a town. And it was our last night there, and I'm always throwing story ideas around as an editor. You do a lot of development, and so I'm always throwing ideas out. So our last night there, I was talking to Brandon, and I was like, I can't believe nobody's done a story where like a teen take, a contemporary teen take on the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and two, like one where the horseman is like a good guy. Like that doesn't, you don't have a lot of takes out there where the horseman is a good dude. And we started chewing on the story over dinner, and by the end of it we had the bones of Hollow, and we got home and worked up a pitch and pitched it to Boom, and they loved it. And so we started working on it, and we were going to take a research trip there in the summer of 2020, and obviously that didn't happen. So that's what we spent the first 8 months of the pandemic doing, was writing Hollow.
And how about the artist? How did the artist come on board?
So the artist was the way that Boom does things, and there's a few studios and editors who still do this out in the comic book world. There's kind of, again, because this is kind of an industry event, you can I'll talk a little bit about kind of the bones of this kind of stuff, right? Like, yeah. There are two ways that you can pitch a project, right? Oh, I don't know why that happened. No, you're fine. There are kind of two ways that you can pitch a project, right? In comics, you can come in as a team or as a writer artist, and you're pitching a project whole cloth, and it's kind of it is all yours, and you're coming in with it already kind of established. But there are some publishers out there who do development, and a writer can come in to a publisher and say, I have this pitch or I have this idea, and not necessarily have an artist attached, and develop it with the editor. The editor will help find that artist and bring that artist into the fold. And I'm not sure how many folks out there do that these days. When I started in comics, that was pretty common at indie publishers, especially in the direct market. But obviously, as like bigger New York publishers, I think that somebody like Whitney Leopard over at Random House Graphic probably does a little bit of that. She comes from the tradition, the development tradition, and it is a really interesting process. It's just a different process. You're actively, your editor acts like kind of a producer, and you're actively in a development situation. And so they are helping bring that vision to life. And it's just, it's just one of those just one of those kind of little picadillos. It's different everywhere. In this case, we had a few artists who we liked and whose style that we really thought would be the right fit for the book. And one of our editors, Allison, is who found Berenice, who is our editor. Barry, who is German. You know, the thing about comics is that they, you know, you work with people everywhere. And Barry was the perfect artist for us, kind of in every way. No, it's totally fine. When you do a Zoom interview in your house, sometimes people get home from the grocery store and are putting groceries away. But Berenice ended up being kind of the perfect artist for us. She got our jokes and was able to translate our jokes really well. She was incredibly funny, and she loved to draw horses, which was a real terrifying prospect when you're pitching a book about the Headless Horseman. Artists hate to draw horses. Probably some people in this room hate to draw horses. And we found out Barry didn't bat an eye, and every chance that she got, she drew the horse. Like we had a horse pass on our script. We had to be like, okay, we got to go through and like make sure that we're describing the horse's acting in our script, in case the horse, and we were like very caveat-y, like, please don't feel like you have to put the horse in every scene that the horse appears in. We just want to make sure that you have the resources in case you want to put the horse in. And she was like, no, I want the horse everywhere. I want the horse acting all over the place. And we found out later, we were doing an interview and we were like, oh, we were so afraid that we'd get an artist who hated to draw horses. And Barry was like, I love to draw horses. That's how I learned to draw. I love horses. They're my favorite thing to draw. And we were like, fascinating, really amazing. So that's how Barry came into the fold. But yeah, you know, because comics is a really odd medium, right? Like there are a lot of ways to do it. There are a lot of configurations that a team takes and a lot of ways to get into that team. You know, now we can't imagine Hollow without Barry. She's so part of the team.
So you have an editor at Boom. Did you
Yes.
say your editor at Boom is the one who found Barry?
Yes. So one of our editors at Boom. At Boom, we have a couple of editors, again, because that's just the way that Boom kind of structures things. We worked with executive editor over there named Sierra Hahn, and Sierra is amazing in all of these wonderful ways. Sierra came up at Dark Horse and was kind of the genius behind the original Buffy comics over there, and has been running the Archaea imprint at Boom for a number of years. And then Sophie Philip Roberts, who was my right hand for a very long time at Boom, and helped me run Boombox for a very long time. Was our other editor over there, and who is an exquisite editor. Sophie, the best thing that an editor can have, obviously, besides like a precise and exacting mind, which a lot of us don't necessarily have a precise and exacting mind, but we make up for it with a lot of esoteric interests and weird, expansive ideas. And Sophie's got a lot of that. She's a really, really good editor. Some of the best notes I've ever seen or gotten. And I was really lucky to have her be my assistant and associate editor for a long time before she graduated to full-on editor.
So that's so funny. That's fascinating that I think of you as an editor in addition to being a writer, and just the idea of an editor being edited, and not only that, but being edited by the person who used to be your assistant or associate editor.
This is not the first time that's happened. Lumberjanes was another example of that. I could not edit myself as a creator or as a writer on Lumberjanes. And our first editors on Lumberjanes were Daphne Plebin, who is maybe the best editor in comics Daphne is an extraordinary story editor. Nobody is better at story than Daphne. And Daphne was my editor. And then Whitney, while she was actively my assistant and associate editor, respectively at different turns, was also my editor on Lumberjanes. Everybody needs an editor. You can do a lot of editing of yourself, and I think a lot of writers do, and a lot of editors do. But you like having an editor is it rules. I give a lot of advice to young creators and young writers who I think get a little sore or take a little personally, feedback from editors, that editing is kind of a gift that you get to have somebody who looks at you and looks at your work with an eye toward making it better always, which is not to say that editors are perfect. Like you're going to get some bad editorial advice and you're just going to throw it away. You're just going to push it away. But it's a real blessing to have somebody look at your work and go, my entire job is to make this better. My entire job. And I love it. I love being edited. I love getting feedback on something that I've worked on that's like critical or has a lot of room for a lot of advice for improvement, because I know that it's going to be better. It rules to get notes, even if they smart for a hot second. But yeah, I've always really enjoyed working with editors as much as I've enjoyed being one. I am somebody who, you say you think of me as an editor, and it is true, because that is what I love. I think more than anything is being an editor. I've always wanted to be an editor. There's not a lot of people who are like, oh, my dream job is to edit comic books, but that was me. I learned what an editor was when I was in high school. Specifically, I learned what a comic book editor was. I knew what an editor was, but I learned what a comic book editor was when I was in high school. And I saw China Clugston Flores drawing cartoons in the margins of Blue Monday, which is a teen sex comedy that Oni Press put out in the early 2000s. And China would draw these cartoons in the margins threatening Jamie Rich, who at the time was the editor-in-chief of Oni and is now one of the editors-in-chief of over at IDW. But threatening Jamie in the margins because Jamie was threatening China in the margins for being late with her pages. And she would draw little cartoons showing him like running after her with an axe and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, that job's for me, which is very funny. But Jamie edited all my favorite comic books. Like all of my favorite comic books, when I learned what comic books could be, were edited by one person. And I was like, oh, interesting. That's really fascinating that's the case. I wonder what that means. And I wanted that, and I thought that was a completely preposterous job to have or want. And I got really lucky. I had kind of a series of really lucky breaks that I took advantage of, and ended up doing my dream job and kind of the dream way to do it for a lot of years. And nothing better than getting to give people the opportunity to tell their stories.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking that not only do editors help you make your work better, but there is this whole aspect of really good editors as tastemakers. And I think if you're not in the industry, people maybe don't realize that. But what you said about Jamie Rich having edited all the comics that you really loved, I find that the same. I noticed that as well. If you're in the industry, then you're the weird person who reads the copyright page and reads the acknowledgement. You're like, who was behind this?
Well, and I think, you know, again, when you're like a teenager, right? Like, you're like, what do I want to, like, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want to do? And so you read these like goofy fucking excuse me, you read these goofy comics that that kind of change your life, and you're like, who gets to make these? And at the time, it was like a 4-person company in Portland, Oregon, making literally just black and white printed on newsprint comics. And I was like, but me, that sounds good. Sounds good to me, making black and white comics at a 4-person team in Portland. You know, and so yeah, it's just teenagers and industry people reading our names in the credits. Just aspiring teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is a taste making role, right? Again, I compare it a lot to being a producer. A lot of the time I compare it to being a producer, because you are you're essentially assembling financing, right? Like, you're sitting there and you're getting a budget, and you are figuring out what projects you're able to bring in, and how you're staffing them, and how you're putting them together. You're going in and you're finding the talent, and you're making teams.
Mm-hmm.
You're bringing people together, and you're managing those teams. And you know, when you're running an imprint, Boombox was just me and Whitney Leopard, who's now at Penguin Random House graphics. And for a long time, it was me and Whitney, and then it was me and Sophie, and then me and Sophie and Kenzie, who was our other assistant editor. And so, you know, when you're lucky, you're really lucky, then you have the opportunity to kind of like build something with a point of view. And I think the small teams help that a lot. You know, and at Boombox, we really did. We had the opportunity to build a point of view. I was lucky because Ross Ritchie, who is the founder of Boom, and Matt Gagnon, who's the editor-in-chief, really kind of believed in me and believed in the weird stuff that I wanted to do. Bryce Carlson, who is now the creative vice president of creative over there, was our managing editor for a really long time. And it let me do weird stuff. I used to write a column in the back of every Boombox book with sketches. I would pay, you know, an artist a couple of $100 to do, like, you know, 5 little pieces of like, oh, we're doing potions this month, so just draw like 5 potion bottles, and it'll just be, you know, used on this sketch page and nothing else. And there, you know, and we would have folks, when they would make their comics, like do mixtapes for the back, and just like, I don't know, it was meant to feel a little bit like a Saturday morning cartoon, like you were sitting around something that was really intimate, and it felt really intimate at the time, and it was really special. And editors get to do that. They get to bring you in and say, like, look at this, look how beautiful this can be. And I feel like my entire kind of like comics taste making career, or like my comics reading career too, is a lot of really smart, wonderful people like pointing at somebody else and going like, holy crud, look at this, it's so good, it's so beautiful, and uplifting other people. I went from like indie comics as a teen into kind of really early webcomics scene, and you can still see this on sites like Ryan North's Dinosaur Comics or Jeff Jacques' Questionable Content, where everybody's webcomic used to have a sidebar that had all of their friends' webcomics. And that's how you learned what other people's comics were. That's, you just skipped around everybody's sidebars until you figured it out. It's what's really special about groups like this too, is that everybody is saying like, oh, look at this beautiful stuff, look at this beautiful art that everybody's making.
Can you talk a little bit about the team building behind Lumberjanes? Because I feel, like I said, I feel like it's so groundbreaking and so influential. But I'd love to hear some maybe stories that people don't know about how you all came together.
Sure. Lumberjanes is a wild one, you know. This was Boombox hadn't really gotten underway yet, right? Like, we had just started kind of putting together the first book that Boombox put out was something called Midas Flesh, which now called Midas, because Midas Flesh sounds really horror comicsy. I don't know how many of you have read Midas, but it's from Ryan North and Shelley and Braden, and Shelley Paroline and Braden Lamb, who were the team behind the first like 60 issues of the Adventure Time comic. And they were an extraordinary team together, just like exquisite, amazing and magical. And I really wanted them to be able to do an original together. And that's kind of what they came up with. And Lumberjanes started as sort of an exercise that Grace Ellis, Grace is a really good, dear, treasured friend of mine, that Grace and I had been noodling around with for Magic 5 teams. I don't know how many of you guys like to play around in tropes just for funsies, but like you know, Scooby-Doo, the Babysitters Club. There are all these Magic 5 teams. There's 5's a perfect starting like core cast for an ensemble. 5 people. You get all these little side dynamics. You know, it's not just like 2 pairs. It's a really nice size, really kind of magic size for an ensemble book. And so we had been playing around with the Magic 5 book, and specifically, we had been joking around that the Babysitters Club, you can make anything with kind of the Babysitters Club as like a thing in the back of your brain, that you could make a treasured book with the dynamics of the Babysitters Club in the back of your brain. So I got like a very weird assignment at work, essentially at Boom, for pitching a project to a now very, very defunct media organization. And I basically had like 2 days to put something together, and there was no creator in the world that could get something to me in 2 days. And so I went home that weekend, and Grace and I wrote down like 50 bad ideas that were just like one line bad ideas. The only one I remember outside of Lumberjanes was like gay dinosaur dads, and it's always the one that I bring up because it's the only one that I remember outside of Lumberjanes. And we just like, we're like in a Google Doc, like just writing words, like word nonsense down. And one of them was Girl Scout camp, but there's monsters. And we were like, great, that's the one. That's the one good one. That's the one good one in this list of terrible ideas. And so we had been playing with the Babysitters Club dynamics. The original Babysitters, for those of you who are not fans, are Christy Thomas, who is the leader and a bit bossy, and Marianne, who is sensitive, and Christy's best friend, Claudia, who is an extraordinary artist and a bit of a scatterbrain, Stacy, who is a cosmopolitan New Yorker, and Dawn, who's from California. And she's a hippie from California. And so we sat down and we combined the idea of those dynamics with a group of 5 friends that we had and their dynamics. And we just kind of like, we're like, okay, what can we do with this melting pot of nonsense to create some teenagers, some tweens? And wrote up essentially like character descriptions for our 5 characters and sat down and we're like, what appeals to us about this idea? And came up with it in a weekend. The original Lumberjanes pitch was like in a weekend. Got to work on Monday and the meeting had been canceled, obviously. But this pitch was a really decent pitch. And so it kind of bopped around for a while, just like at boom on my desk. And Nate Stevenson was moving back to LA. Nate had been my intern when he was in college. I used to run the intern department at Boom in like 2012, which it's when you have a small company, you wear a lot of weird hats. So I kind of like managed the interns for a few years there. And so Nate was one of the interns the summer between his junior and senior year, and was moving back to LA. And I was like, I've got this pitch. I don't want to be a co-writer on it, but I ended up there. But I was like, I don't want to be the co-writer on it. But I feel like, be good to have somebody with a little comics experience to like jump on here who, is who's got a great sense of humor and is really good. And Nate heard like 2 lines of the pitch and was like, I'm in. And so we kind of formalized the pitch and brought Gus Allen, Brooklyn Allen in to the process to do the original character designs. And Gus was perfect. Gus was a friend of Whitney Leopard's from Savannah School of Art and Design, and just killed it. Like, still to this day, everybody does incredible work on Lumberjanes and beautiful, extraordinary work on Lumberjanes, but nobody like captures who they are the way that Nate and Gus do. Yeah, and then our colorist and our letterer were, brought in by Whitney. Marta, again, was brought in by the editor. Marta, who was with the entire series, who colored every issue of Lumberjanes, was, again, a friend of Whitney's that was brought in, did extraordinary work. I really wanted, because I'm a freak, and I was even more of a freak then, about hand lettering. I love letterers. Everybody should love letterers. If you don't love letterers, then go study up and you will love letterers. The reason that comics look so good, the reason that your favorite comics look so good, is because the letterers are lettering them. They're amazing people. And I really love hand lettering. It's not something that a lot of folks have the bandwidth to do, mostly because publishers do not pay them to do it. But I managed to convince them that Lumberjanes needed to be hand lettered. And so Aubrey came on and lettered all of Lumberjanes. About halfway through, Aubrey created a Lumberjanes font from her handwriting, thank God. But for a very long time, Lumberjanes was hand lettered, because that I had a lot of affection for that form and really wanted it. But Aubrey was with us the whole time. It was the it was supposed to be 8 issues. Lumberjanes was supposed to be 8 issues. It's supposed to be a real short in and out kind of a thing. So Nate is an amazing kind of like bombast, right? Like he went off and made She-Ra, the Nimona movie is coming out very soon. Like Nate couldn't write Lumberjanes forever, and everybody had lives and kind of like drifted in and out of Lumberjanes for the rest of its time. And we all still love it and we're all still a part of it, but it kind of took on a life of its own. It's really separate from us. And it sort of became that way almost immediately. We had cosplayers at our first Emerald City before the book even came out. People connected with those characters immediately. And they've changed a lot of young queer people's lives. And so it's just, it's Lumberjanes is I think kind of the chaotic nature of what the team turned out to be, which was what ended up being a lot of folks coming in and leaving their mark on it. I can't talk about Lumberjanes without mentioning Kat Lay, who came in on issue 18 and was my co-writer for the rest of the series. And Lumberjanes would not have been able to continue, nor would it have been as good without Kat. Kat is an extraordinary writer and extraordinary artist. Should check out Snapdragon if you haven't. Her graphic novel is amazing. And Thirsty Mermaids, if you like a little saucy mermaid action. But we just had this team where people would come in and pick up the characters and the baton and the world and put their spin on it. The graphic novels had a different team. Mariko Tamaki came in and did with Gus over at Abrams, did YA novels, did like literal Babysitter's Club style YA novels over at Abrams. And so we had these incredible queer creators that came in and and left their mark and left themselves on Lumberjanes and were changed by it. So yeah, it was a team effort throughout its entire life, its entire life cycle. It was something we really loved and protected, but it was also the team was ever evolving and ever changing. That's kind of what was special about it. Sorry, that was a big ramble. I don't know.
Actually, I was thinking so many thoughts while you were talking, Shannon. One of the things that I was thinking about while you were describing all of that is how, as somebody who comes from the book publishing world, there's a part of me that's really envious of this collaborative nature that exists in the comics publishing world and in television production and in movies, where you have groups of people coming together to build stories out. And that, that exists a little bit in book publishing, but really, it's not common. So there's a part of me that sees what you did there as a sort of like nirvana of creative people coming together and having fun and building out a world.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the other side of me as an agent that
sure
deals with different types of entities and business models. And, I feel like comics publishers have a reputation, which I've now bumped up against a little bit, even in my
I would love to talk about this.
Yeah. Where so yeah, it's like this huge tension in my mind between what I see as the good creative side of the comics world and what I see as some very dubious, disturbing business practices.
Of course. No, absolutely. And I think, it is interesting because I think on one hand, right, like the way Lumberjanes was incredibly like this incredible process that was really special, but it was a lot of young people who were frustrated and exhausted. And we were really lucky in some ways because Boom's deal is a 50-50 deal. So no matter what, you get 50% of the back end on your project. So, you know, as opposed to like I would say what, like 5 to 8%, right? At a New York publisher.
Yeah.
You know, you get 50% of the back end.
Well,
So
I think there's a difference because comics publishers, it would be 50% of net. Is that right? Net
correct.
receipts.
Mhm.
Whereas with a book publisher, they're giving you usually 6 to 8% for paperback of the list price,
Mhm.
or 10 to 12% on hardcover.
Gotcha. Great. So you get 50% of net, and that's not the same at every publisher, certainly. But what you're getting on the front are smaller advances. You're getting a more chaotic structure. You're getting like a shorter time frame to work. You know, you are getting paid a page rate. So you're getting paid while you're working, which is great a lot of the time. You know, you're not waiting for the book to come out for your final payout or whatever on your advance. You know, so there are advantages, I would say, to doing it that way. But like you said, there is a lot, you're giving up some things, right? Like if you're, and that's the same at every publisher, you know, you can look at something like, think about Image, you know, Image, and I'm going to throw numbers out that are not real. I'm going to throw kind of generalized numbers out. Image, you're getting 90%. You're getting most of your back end. You're getting it. Basically, Image is saying like, great, we're going to give you the Image name, we're going to give you the Image machinery, but you're going to have to market. You know, we have a marketing department, but it's reserved for certain things. You're going to have to do the majority of the marketing on your book. You're going to have to do the majority of the design. You're going to have to do the majority of the kind of legwork of producing the book. But if you make Saga, then, oh boy, are you in like Flynn every month because you're getting most of that stuff back. I mean, like Boom, right? It's like, is a compromise, right? Because you are, you know, Boom wants to not just be your publisher. They want to be your partner. They want to be, you know, your, they have a full editorial department that is going to help you develop your project. They have a full marketing department. They have, you know, a publisher. They have a design department that's very, very good. They're going to do all that stuff for you. They also want to be your producer. You know, they have deals with Netflix. They have, you know, deals with other studios. They have a lot of, you know, they have a lot of folks that want your stuff. So you are essentially going like, ooh, okay, so I'm signing up for this pipeline. But my agent isn't going out and selling it. You know, my agent isn't going and taking it out somewhere. You're having to then deal within that machinery, right? And then you have traditional publishing, which I'm sure you know, obviously the structure much better than I do. You know, where I think you are doing the rights to just the work itself. And, you know, your agent is then going out and advocating for you in other areas and for world rights and stuff like that. So I am of the mind that if you can, you should have a little bit of a hand in each pot. In my opinion, I've really, I have valued having Lumberjanes somewhere where I get a piece of the pie that is that big. I've enjoyed it. My co-creators have enjoyed it. It's been great. It's been really good. But, you know, there's a lot of things that are very frustrating about being at a comics publisher. You know, when you're working with a book publisher, you have their machinery and it's a more sophisticated machine. And you know, I think anybody with an agent has a leg up because you have somebody who's advocating for you. And publishers, they want to get the bag,
Mhm.
man. Like they're, people who work at publishers, awesome people most of the time. But they are working there on the behalf of the entity, and they can do a lot of work to try and protect you as a creator, but they are working for the man. And it's, you need to be there advocating for yourself and taking care of yourself. And an agent is the best way to do that.
Mhm.
Anyway, you guys
Wow,
do.
yeah. Well,
sorry, another rant, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a conversation best had at a bar, I think.
Yes. No, and I'm not, here's the thing, like a lot of these publishers are not like, they're not engaging necessarily in like abusive practices, right? Like they are just publishers. Like that is, they're in it to make money, and they're in it to make money by putting the least amount of money as they can in it.
Mhm.
And that's just like a fact. It's not talking badly about anybody. It's just a fact.
All right. Well, I would really love to open it up to questions, because I'm sure some of you here might want to ask Shannon some questions yourself. So you can either just unmute yourself or raise your hand, turn on your camera, post in the chat.
And it can be about anything. Please, it can be about comics or just reading comics, favorite comics, whatever you want.
Brigitte, can you unmute yourself at all?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Shannon, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for this. This is great. I love Lumberjanes, so this was wonderful. But yeah, I would love to know about the stories that inspired you growing up, whether it's comics or, it could be a movie or a book or whatever the case.
Totally. I love that question. I mean, the comics that inspired me growing up, I was a big, the first comic that really kind of like blew my mind, that I was like, oh man, this is the good stuff. Was they published Bone for a while in Disney Adventures magazine, and I discovered Bone there and got very into it. That was like the first time that I was like, ooh boy, this comic book stuff. I was not a superhero comics reader. That wasn't for me. I was a big animation girl growing up. I really, for a long time, I was like, I want to be an animator, but what I really wanted to be was like a story person. I really loved the art of animation. I studied I was a little nerd that like bought a lot of animation books, and I loved like Don Bluth movies growing up. I was a real Don Bluth kid. I loved the Babysitter's Club, which I mentioned before, but the Babysitter's Club, the BSC was a big deal for me. And really, really special, but animation in general, I fancied myself a little animation historian. So I watched a lot of weird animation that they had at like our video store. And I grew up kind of in like the perfect time to be a Disney fan of like Disney animated features. I watched a lot of those, and those were really, really inspiring to me. The artistry of that.
All
Thank
right.
you, Rita.
Thank you so much. This was great.
So maybe we could go to Tracy's question in the chat, and then Jeff will go to you next. So Tracy, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, how are you guys? This is so wonderful. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all that you guys do. I'm just wondering, how do you attract an editor, the right editor, if you don't have an agent, you're not plugged in the industry? I do like indie and niche type stuff, and I'm just trying to attract an editor.
Yeah, sure. When I was an editor, the biggest kind of like way that I found folks was actually not generally through necessarily through the agent process. Like I got a lot of pitches on my desk, and it's not like I didn't discover a lot of folks through their agent, but I spent a ton of time every day on Twitter or on Tumblr or on, even like Instagram, reading folks's comics. I went to zine fests. I do still go to zine fests and mini comic fests and buy a lot of people's like Xeroxed comics or Xeroxed, even just like Xeroxed prose zines and stuff like that. It sounds pat to be like the best way to kind of like attract folks' attention is to just make stuff that you really like, and put it out there and finish it. But it really is the thing, making stuff and putting it out there for people to find, whether it's like at a zine fest and you're just selling it for $2 and you make a pretty cover in your friend's version of Photoshop, or if it's publishing it online somewhere and linking to it and putting it somewhere. That's always been the thing for me. The biggest thing is the stuff that I really remember folks for are things where where it's somebody who made a mini comic about two elderly ladies falling in love because like one of them was a telemarketer and kept calling back. And it just like, this is a story that's just like, it's sweet and it's gentle. But it was beautifully drawn and I like never forgot that artist. I would email her all the time and just be like, what are you up to? And she was like, in school, and it's not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily looking for work, but it was just like, she put something out there that was really affecting and special and beautiful. And we are really lucky to be in a time when you can put your work out there in all kinds of ways and in all kinds of shapes and forms, and have people see it. You don't need somebody to give you permission to do it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We should make a gigantic plaque that says you don't need permission. Just hang it in all of our offices, I think. All right, Jeff.
Sort of a follow-up to that question. It's interesting how with traditional publishing, a lot of times projects get sold before they're actually finished.
Mm-hmm.
So as a person who's both a writer and an editor,
Mm-hmm.
how does the writer get the best out of their editor? And on the other side, how does the editor get the best out of their writer?
Ask a lot of questions.
Huh?
That's my biggest advice for that. Ask a lot of questions. Be curious. Be curious about why somebody is making the choice that they are. Ask them how another way that you could think about doing it. Ask a lot of questions on both sides, frankly. It is a collaborative process and should always be a collaborative process. I find that the best notes are a series of questions, because if you can't explain why you're making a creative choice, then you probably should go back and think about it a little bit more.
Cool. Thank you. That's great.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right. Wow, Shannon, this was so great. Thank you.
This was
so much.
such a ball.
Yes.
Have me back anytime.
I wish that everybody here, I don't know, some of you might not be in a position to do this, but if you could turn your video camera on so that we can say thank you to Shannon, and unmute yourself. I really appreciate you spending this time with us, Shannon. It was super inspiring, and I certainly hope that we cross paths again and that we see you again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
All right,
it
everybody,
so much.
please say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye,
All
y'all.
right.
Bye,
Bye,
bye.
everybody. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Bye.
Bye.